Hello, everyone. I am Ashton, and this is Kayla. And today we're going to talk about a very unromantic story that she wrote that is inspired by Taylor Swift's song Seven. And the story is called The Girl in the Weeds. Just so you know, the story will be linked below, and this conversation is about the story, assuming that you have already listened to it. So there will be spoilers. I will have her explain it to you a little bit.
All right, so The Girl in the Weeds is about a young boy who is 7 years old named Lucas, and he is on summer break. He doesn't really have a lot of friends. He's obviously stuck with his parents because it's, summer, and he doesn't live in the best household. Content warnings for this story, by the way. It does involve domestic violence, gun violence, child abuse, and unnatural child death. And I'm phrasing it that way because I don't know what I'm allowed to. I think YouTube doesn't like the M word. And so, anyway, one day he is outside and he hears his father yelling, and he goes and he hides in the weeds in the backyard. And after he comes out of the weeds, he finds a girl named Shilpa, and she tells him that she lives in his house. And it's a little weird because you would think that he would know that. But when she wants to prove it to him, he says that his father doesn't allow people in the house, and she says it's okay, no one will see me. And it is then that he discovers that he is the only one who can see Shilpa, and she has had very similar life experiences as him that unfortunately did not end well, as one could probably guess, because she is a ghost. And she is trying to warn him about his father because she thinks the same thing is going to happen to Lucas that happened to her.
And we will be breaking that down. Firstly, I think I want to go ahead and ask about why. Why is he the only one that can see her?
Well, when I was writing the story, the idea I was having in my head, at first, like, she wasn't really a ghost. I wrote the story in mind of she was basically just this imaginary friend that he created because he is so deathly afraid of his father and what his father's going to do to him one day. But he's 7 and he doesn't quite understand those emotions. And so that's what his brain creates. But upon having people read it, uh, they felt that it made more sense for her to be a ghost. And I'm like, okay, because I was going back and forth of, do I want her to be a ghost? Do I want her to just be kind of like a fear of his that he can't quite explain? And so, and I ultimately went with she's not really a ghost, but then after people were reading it, they didn't really get what I was going for. So that's why she is a ghost.
I was actually like, while I was reading it the entire time, I was just like, okay, I think that you and I talked about it ahead of time where you told me that you were kind of like not sure if she should be a ghost or not. And while I was reading it, I was just like, she's probably a ghost because you said that she's a ghost. But I definitely like could see where your influence was throughout the story, where you definitely had that in mind initially, where it was just like, Lucas is an only child. He doesn't know what is happening. And so
Yeah.
it's nice to have a friend who is going through similar circumstance or who has gone
Yeah.
through certain circumstances.
Yeah, that's why there was the mention of Lucas thinking like, oh, we used to, because Shilpa talked about her mom and how her mom used to make her chai, and in his head, he's like, oh, like my mom used to have a friend who did that, and when she said that her parents were from India, he's like, oh, that's like thinking that's where my mom's friend was from. So that's why I mentioned the mom's friend because I was writing it. I that was what I was trying to do was like hint that Shilpa wasn't really a ghost, that she was kind of like this child he created from a past memory of these people that he'd met and known in the past, but it's not the direction it is now, so now it's
Yeah.
just coincidence, I guess.
I was really curious about that too. So, since you ended up not going that direction and you ended up taking in like more of like a ghostly one, uh, I was really curious like how that exactly worked. Because he said that he'd been in like the weeds like several times. And I was wondering, why had he never seen her before? Like, why was he like suddenly like what activates her appearance?
For me personally, it's she is a little kid and she was kind of trying to get to him for a while, but just it took a minute of like several encounters of the dad kind of screaming or scaring him for her to kind of get to where she could actually be seen.
Gotcha.
Had trouble making contact for a little while.
Yeah, I really like for like their first interaction because you were trying very hard to kind of like put it in the mindset of a 7-year-old boy.
Mhm.
And I like where you put down like she's weird, he thought, but he was bored and wanted someone to play with, even if it was a girl. It's just like that is so little 7-year-old boy
Yeah,
thinking.
well, I was trying to ha add some little hints of the way that his one, that is a very typical thing for a little boy to think, and a little girl too, like vice versa. Like, I don't know if, because there are some things I know that I need to go back and fix and redo, but I was trying to add some little nuggets of how he's picked up kind of on his father's way of thinking at such a young age. Obviously, it's not the level of his father because he's 7 and he still has compassion and likes people, but kind of doesn't hold girls in as high of a regard as he does boys. Like
Gotcha.
that's why he desperately wants the boys' approval at school is because he doesn't have his father's. So it's like, oh, she'll do, I guess. And then
Yeah.
obviously ends up being her friend, but that's where that was kind of coming from.
Great. I have two different questions because of that. You can feel free to answer them in whatever order. So the first one is obviously she appears to him and to Lucas,
Mhm.
and Lucas is the only one that is able to see her. And I was curious why. Like I thought at first, like initially, like maybe like adults just couldn't see her. And then you had it where Drew also could not see her. And so I was curious about that. And then I guess my other question would be just could you go into the dynamics of the household in a little bit more depth? Like, I mean, I know
Mhm.
basically that it's a very terrible home environment, but I was kind of curious, like, how you felt as if Lucas viewed his mom and like what his relationship was with his mom versus his dad.
Okay. Well, first of all, with him being the only one able to see Shilpa, she was trying only to contact him. She didn't really care about contacting anyone else. And that's just more along the lines of the typical ghost story of some people can see the ghost and some people can't. And
Gotcha.
and here happens to be the one able to see her because that's who she wants to be seen by. And his mom, he loves his mom. I know there's a mention in there about, her being kind and letting him stop off to play at the park. But I think he loves her, but he's kind of grown up in a household of his father constantly threatening and abusing and yelling at his mother and him as well at times. And his mom gets it most of the time, but some, unfortunately, Lucas does as well. And I think with his mother, she's kind of always crying, and that he's just kind of used to it. It's just kind of like, okay, like mom's crying again. Mom's always crying about something. Like, oh, what did mom do to make dad mad now? Like, kind of that not really understanding as a little kid because he desperately wants his father's approval. And kind of in a way, not like blaming his mom like he thinks his mom deserves it, but just being like, oh, well, she made him mad. Like she's always like, she just made him mad again. Like, it's
Gotcha.
never because he's 7 and he doesn't have rational thought. It's never, well, dad's being unreasonable and terrible. It's mom made him mad. It's kind of, he's not really taught to respect women. He's just not quite at that age yet where it's kind of really come out, but there's just like the little seeds planted in there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And what would you say his dynamic is with his dad?
He's terrified of him, terrified of making him angry, but at the same time, I think, kind of looks up to him, if that makes sense. Not because of the things that he does, but a lot of times if there is an absent parent, then you desperately, desperately seek their approval. And I don't mean absent as in they're not around at all, but like they can be physically there, but not emotionally. And sometimes you really seek after that. And that's why when he first met Shilpa, it's like he tried to make himself big, like his dad does when he sees somebody bigger. Like, you can see there's that admiration of his dad doing specific things that maybe really aren't quite the things to look up to. But he's a little kid and he's scared of him, but he wants his approval. He wants his dad to love him. He wants to make his dad proud. He wants to be a brave kid and a brave boy and do what, boys are supposed to do, which is be tough and be able to get hurt and not cry and all that kind of really terrible stuff that little boys are sometimes taught.
Yeah. So you have a mention in the very beginning that this kid, Billy Elrod, called him a chicken. And then
Hmm.
later you have Shilpa also calling him out on being a chicken.
Hmm.
And he's very upset by this. Is this something that you think happens in his home life? Like his dad kind of like calls him out on not being like man enough, even though, he's 7.
Yeah, that's definitely where that comes from. Is his dad like even though you don't see it, I tried to kind of like hint at it as, a lot of times when little girls fall down and they cry or something, or if they're scared of the dark, it's like, oh, like my poor little princess. But if a boy is, it's like, oh, man up, toughen up, you'll get over it, get over it. And that's very much so how his dad treats him is you're not supposed to be scared. You're not supposed to cry. Like, what are you're a boy. What are you doing?
Yeah. Although he's also not technically supposed to be out of the house at all to go explore and do what boys do.
He's allowed to be out of the house, but his dad gets really angry when his mother gets on to him for being in the weeds and being at the creek. And most of the reason for like that is just like he's alone and his mom doesn't want him to get hurt. I don't think his dad really, I'm saying that like I don't know. I do know his dad doesn't really care so much that he's out. It's his mom doesn't want him to get hurt. And his dad just doesn't want to deal with his mom like worrying about it or babying him. And it's just like that's why later on in the story where he's like if you're going to slink off, be sneakier about it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I don't know if he did it intentionally or not, but there was like a moment where I was reading it. There's a scene where both Shilpa and him are hiding in the closet, and you mention the how they were playing Neverland earlier and they were pretending to be the pirates, which by the way, you did a very great job integrating like literally so much of the song into it.
Thank you.
And I thought it was interesting, like there's kind of like a little bit of like a metaphor there where like both of these kids were kind of like trapped in their homes and then they were hiding in the same closet that they like put the Lost Boys in their imagination.
Yeah.
Was that like something that you were trying to go for on purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the closet is the place they go to hide, and in their like imaginary land, it's where they put the kids who are scared and lost, and they're the ones who are big, bad, and brave, and so they're tossing those kids in there because that's the place that they go when they're scared, and in their imagination, they're not scared. In real life, they are, but
Yeah. I thought that was really good because it was just like a very like small hint at it, but I was just like, I like this and I'd like to hear like more of like an expansion on that.
yeah. Well, obviously, little kids have great imaginations. I don't know why we lose that when we get older, but we do. And I think playing
Some of us become
pirates,
writers.
well, I think a lot of kids played the whole pirates or like cowboys or cop or something like that, right? And I think Neverland one, there was some mention of the pirates, which for the song, so that's why I chose that. But also, it was kind of, I feel, a good like kind of medium between because even though you get older and you realize like a lot of things don't matter, boys and girls can like the same things when you're younger. It's like, no. And I felt like Neverland was kind of like that thing that young kids would both like, boys and girls. And in there, it's like they can obviously relate to the lost children and he has his mom who he can count on, but he's not really safe with his dad. Like he might as well like he be better off without a father. And Shilpa is obviously, unfortunately, not alive. And that was just kind of something where it's like, yes, they can relate to those children in terms of not having parents, even though they technically have them. That
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense. Like that was my
No, it
thought
does.
process in that.
'Cause, like, I
So
know that there's something with like Peter Pan and like the Lost Boys. Like, I can't remember now, but like, I think that there is something about like how they were kind of like more neglected children, and like that was when Peter Pan like snatched a lot of them. Not
yeah.
necessarily Wendy and her brothers, but the other Lost Boys.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's been a while and I have never actually read the original work, so I that sounds like it'd probably be about right.
I guess asking more about Shilpa now. So when she says that she lives in the house, like what exactly does that mean?
She still goes ghost. I say this like I don't really like believe in ghost, but typically when you watch movies or something, ghosts tend to haunt the area that the land that they like, not necessarily like the room or the exact spot, but just like the land that they died in. And so she very much so still roams around the house, roams around the weeds, goes to the swing set. And I would like to say her being able to be at the park, that was a flaw, and not going back and editing and finding a way to tie in Drew and Shilpa and all that stuff, because once I decided she was a ghost, I was like, and I like sent it for recording and sent it to you. I was like, oh, she wouldn't be able to be there, but that's fine. That's whatever. I'll fix it in a later draft. Or I could just say my ghost can be anywhere she wants, whatever. It's my story. I don't know.
Exactly. She can do whatever she wants to.
Um, Oh,
And
by the
then
way, shout out. I used the name Shilpa because Andrew and I have a friend named Shilpa and she's lovely. And the reason I made her from her parents, not her, she was born in America, but the reason I made her parents from India is because of the line, pack your dolls in a sweater, we'll move to India forever. Yeah, okay, cool.
oh, it
I
does
was
say
like,
India. Okay.
I was like, oh
So
my
I have been
gosh, did I like
missing.
mishear that? But so
Okay, well, good.
that is why her parents are mentioned to be from India. It was there was like I was trying to add little tidbits of the song, and we have a friend who's from India, and her name is Shilpa. So shout out to Shilpa, who is a very lovely human. I'm sorry I made you a deceased child in this story.
Speaking of friends, you got a friend of yours to record this story. How was that process for you? Is that fun?
It was fun. I'd never actually heard him narrate. I was in school with him and like I think he graduated before me. So I never really talked to him all like too much in college. Like we had classes together and stuff, and you know those people where it's like you don't really like talk to them a whole lot, but like, you might say something every now and again. And I was
Yeah,
like, and I've always really liked him. He's always been very nice. And I remember I was just like, I want a male narrator for this. And I was like, I mean, my husband has a nice voice, but like, I didn't know if he would want to do it. So I was like trying to think of other people first. And the first person who popped in my head was John, because John has an excellent voice. And then I was like, and he also like does narrations, like voice acting and stuff. Like, this is perfect. I'll ask him. So that's kind of how that went. It was basically like, I want a male narrator. Don't know if my husband would want to do it. He probably would if I asked him, but let me ask someone else first.
yeah.
Ah, this is the first person I thought of because he has a lovely voice and it's what he does. So,
So shout out to John.
yes. And so I was very happy. I've never actually heard him narrate anything. So I didn't know how it was going to sound, but I trusted him. So,
Yeah, I thought it was a nice touch. At the very end, there was something that I was a little bit confused about, or I guess two things. But one was there's a moment where Lucas ends up getting really upset with Shilpa, and he's referring to her as somebody that he used to consider as a friend. It could have just been me. So why is he so angry with her in that moment?
well, first he still had like a little bit of anger of why is she like trying to tell me these things about my dad? Like there are things that he tries to push aside, even though he's terrified of him, he also like admires him in a way for in certain regards. Also, he was like scared of her. Like when he saw her the way that she was, like that was scary to him. So it's like he doesn't want to be her friend anymore because she's scared. Like the way she looked was like scary. Like that was basically what that was one, he already had a little bit of like resentment for how she pushed the topic of his father. And two was He's a little kid who saw something scary and he doesn't want to be around it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Was that so with her appearance and it getting like more and more disgruntled throughout the thing, was that because it was kind of set in a time period where like basically once he found her, it was just kind of like how she ended up like looking throughout that time period throughout the summer or
Basically, when he meets her, like she presents herself like as she wants to be seen, and the the more times, like the more encounters, the more energy she has to use to appear to him, like her facade like kind of starts fading, and what she kind of starts looking like near the end starts coming out, and she's also trying to warn him. It's almost like she can't really like help
tell
it,
him.
even though she like probably could, but she's also still like stuck at, she's still a little girl. And it's kind of supposed to show like over time, okay, yes, things aren't that bad. Okay, things are a little weird. Things are getting, she's looking a little rough. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, things escalated. And for Lucas, even though he doesn't understand it, like he's always had that fear that something is going really bad is going to happen to him at the hands of his father. And that's why he's so terrified when his dad has his gun out, because his dad, though he's never used it on him or his mother, he has very much so threatened them with it. And I think that's enough to make anyone terrified to have thoughts of what could happen.
Yeah, because I noticed that you added in like the scene when he's having the sleepover with his friend Drew, that even though it's his house, he can't control when he has to go to the restroom. It seems as if it's very habitual for him to tiptoe down the hallway.
That's more so he doesn't want to like disturb his parents. He can go to the bathroom. Like his dad's not so, I mean, his dad's very unhinged, so that's the incorrect word I was about to use. His dad's like he can go to the restroom, but he just so doesn't want to disturb his father. And why his father was so upset. One, his father was upset for stupid reasons, as like a lot of
Yeah,
abusive people get upset for. And he was, he's never had a friend this close to him who stayed over at his house. He's still very young, and so this is probably in about the same age people usually start having sleepovers anyway. But he, his dad, I think what kind of pushed it over the limit was when he opened the door, because I think I made a reference to it, like his dad always knows, like that, like somehow his dad always knows when he's there. And so he opened the door to find Lucas eavesdropping. But so it wasn't that he couldn't go to the restroom, why he was tiptoeing, so much as just not wanting to disturb him. And he just couldn't help himself of, in his fear of not wanting to disturb his father, he had to make sure he wasn't just like his friend, his new friend wasn't disturbing him too. And then he ended up
right.
making his father very angry. And it's not his fault at all, but it's just kind of the messy, doesn't make any sense part of the household, as those, I think, households tend to be.
Yeah. And then before I forget, my other question about Shilpa was at the end, he ends up seeing her like fresh and new again.
Mhm.
Can you explain a little bit more into your thought process for that one?
Yes, some of this was me simply like not changing things when I decided that she was a ghost. Uh,
Okay.
But the idea of that was just seeing the parallel of how someone can be completely fine and not completely fine, because she's right there and she looks completely 100% good. And then, like, there's the, like, skeleton on the ground. And that was kind of what that was. I know another question is probably like, how had you not found her before then? And it's like, well, one, some things I just forgot to go back and do a little tweaking to. And the other thing is, it is a big field and he's running like haphazardly, whereas he
Yeah.
typically has like a pattern that he can like he doesn't ever like, it's not like he goes like super, 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 super far. He goes as far as like a little kid feels comfortable, but he was just running. And
Yeah, that's what I kind of figured. It's just like as somebody who spent a good amount of time in Kansas, fields could be huge. Like, and especially with like all of like the tall grass and everything, like it's very easy to lose things in there. I was
yeah.
thinking maybe that he like saw her one time, but like he chose to not remember it.
Yeah. And I didn't get that far into it. My thing was just like, well, he like one, like I said, at first she wasn't supposed to be a ghost, and then I thought about it like a minute and I was like, well, it's a big field. Like he probably didn't go that far back and he's just like running.
Yeah.
Um,
Was the creek around the house also?
the creek wasn't like um right like in parallel, like what that's not the right word. The creek is like not too far off, but it's far enough to where like his dad's voice would be like distant. It's not like right by the field.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what was your inspiration for this story? Like, I know it's based off of Seven, but like, can you explain like why like listening to the song, like listening to the lyrics, like how you got from there to the girl in the weeds?
Yeah, it was the I've been meaning to tell you, I think your house is haunted. Your dad is always mad, and that must be why. That and then you won't have to cry or hide in the closet. And obviously, like you can interpret the song any way you want, but when I heard it, it sounded like a child who was scared, like a child who saw another kid who was scared in their own household. So,
Yeah,
and I was just like, okay, well, this can be very easily be turned into like a abusive home, like ghost story kind of thing.
yeah, agreed.
And I've known people to be in relationships like this, and I think it's kind of, I don't know, I can't imagine because I've never been in a situation like that. And just, I guess, hearing the lyrics and then also knowing people who have been through certain things. It was just kind of like, this is like very horrific. It might not be like, Freddy Krueger kind of horrific, but it's a very real life, I think,
Yeah.
horror story. Like, even though
And
Lucas is alive and well, I wouldn't necessarily say well, but alive at the end, like his Lucas survives the story. It's just kind of like, it's
it's a
not a
sad
fun,
story.
yeah, it's not a fun place to grow up. It's a terrifying thing to be in.
Yes. How long had it been since Shilpa's family had lived there?
I actually have not really put that much thought into it. I
Okay.
just know that she used to live there and that her parents are long gone, and I don't specify what happened to them.
Right.
Like,
Because
I'm
Shilpa
trying to,
doesn't know what happened to them because she would be the only one who would know.
yeah, it's to me the time frame of which she lived there wasn't necessarily the important part. Or obviously, a lot of time has passed because like she is the state that she is in when he finds her in the weeds
Right.
at the end. But I didn't like think that hard on that part because I didn't think that was necessarily like an important part, like the because it wasn't necessarily solving the story of Shilpa so much as confronting the fears of Lucas.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why. Like there was literally absolutely no reason for me to be thinking this, but like at some point on like around page seven, which nobody's gonna know what I'm referencing because they're listening to this and not reading it. But I guess it was when she like kind of like stared into the sun when she was like talking about like what happened to her. At some point, I was just like, there's something creepy about this girl. I don't like her. Like, is she actually like kind of like this like malevolent like being that's like putting
Mhm.
all these like thoughts into Lucas's head and is gonna make him like more afraid than he should be? And then, you reveal just how bad the dad is throughout it. But it's just like,
Yeah.
I don't trust her. Like at some point, I'm just like, I don't trust this girl.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned in I don't know if we ever posted it, but I can't remember what video it was in, but I think I mentioned like I tend to like writing horror that's more so like real life based with like supernatural just like or horror elements kind of sprinkled into it.
Mhm.
So it would have been like an like nice to have like a very creepy just like ghost that was there to cause chaos, but to me the scariest part is having the person who is supposed to protect you be
Right.
the threat. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just, for some reason, it's just like She seems like she is the embodiment of dread, and she is just making his life so much harder.
Also, did you notice, I know you're not as into like country, but did you notice the usage of the name Drew
No, I did
from
not.
Teardrops on My Guitar?
Ah,
I was
is
hoping
this
you
going to be a tie-in to a future story?
probably not, but I was just like, did she catch it?
I did not. I know that song, but I did not. I just assumed that you were like, Andrew, Drew.
Oh no. Nope. It was going between Drew and Corey from Teardrops on My Guitar and Stay Beautiful, but considering Stay
Gotcha.
Beautiful is on my hopeful list of stories, like
Yeah.
I
See, Drew is just such a sweet kid that it's just like he would never break somebody's heart.
not
Because
yet.
I like how patient he was with like Lucas. He was just like Lucas, like obviously terrible at playing baseball, and he's just like, no, dude, I got you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he's gonna grow up to break some hearts.
Apparently.
Spoiler. Maybe one of these days I'll write a straight up like horror story, but so far the stuff that's given me inspiration has been very much so real life kind of.
By the way, if this is your first time tuning into us, this is the third story that she has written that is based off of Taylor Swift songs. And I have two out. We post them on the 13th of each month. And so I will be coming out with a story inspired by
That's not
Wildest
13.
Dreams in March. Story six, seven,
It'll be 6.
six.
Well, if you made it this far, thank you. That was about the girl in the weeds, and the next story will be inspired by Wildest Dreams, and that will be out March 13th on Ashton's channel. If you like this video, come back for more. Like I said, Ashton will have her story up March 13th on her channel, which will be linked in the description below.
Indeed.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.